All right. Well, welcome back, everybody, to another Re-Education Experience podcast with me, your host, Darren Langille. As always, you get me. Now, I'm sure if you're listening, I was thinking about this. You're probably wondering where the heck have I been? Because I've kind of taken a bit of a hiatus for the last little bit. I apologize for everybody listening. It's been a while since I released another uh, episode. It's been a hectic few months, and the man I'm talking to today has a hectic few months all the time. So he'll tell me, Darren, you got to no excuses. But I met him back when I was down speaking in Nashville in September at the Atlas Alliance Summit. Today's guest on the show is a man by the name of Alan Stein Jr. And Alan's not from the real estate industry. Similar to many of the guests I have on the show, we aren't going into detailed tactics about realtor stuff or lead generations or funnel building. We're not doing that today, but we're going to go into tactics surrounding something that I think maybe at this time of the year is even more important. And it's developing what he coaches on and speaks on, like a winning mindset, uh, championship habits. I know you use that term, and this concept of unparalleled focus. So Alan, if you don't know him, is a multiple times author. You can see the books in his background if you're watching on YouTube. Keynote speaker extraordinaire, basically does that full time now with, we'll talk about that, and a performance expert. At present, he is, like I said, speaking full time, but in his past life, which is really cool, he spent 15 plus years coaching some of the highest performing basketball players on the planet. Super unique. Even when I say that, it kind of gives me goosebumps, to be honest. So names like Kobe, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, I see that should ring a bell for even those realtors here that are not basketball people. He's been there with them on those early days of the journey. What he's done and why it's so intriguing, and me with my sports background too, is he's translated a lot of these lessons he's learned um, doing things at the highest level into applicable strategies for business people and in leveling up your performance. So, Alan, with that intro, welcome to the show. Um, I know your background is extremely robust. I could have gone on and on. What did I miss that you think the audience should know beyond some of the cool accolades like that?
Well, man, I actually think you nailed it. You gave me goosebumps and really appreciate the kind introduction. I've been looking forward to this conversation since I met you in Nashville, but certainly since we put this on the calendar. I mean, really, the only other thing that's relevant is I'm the father of three children, and that's a pretty meaningful part of my life. But from a professional standpoint, that was about as good of an introduction as I've ever received. So thank you.
Ah, there you go. Love it. Love it. Well, the thing that stood out to me right when I met you was how committed you were to making your time with us down at Nashville as impactful as possible. It took me no more than like 3 seconds of knowing you that I knew that here we were in prep mode, right? And the stage was there, and it was this huge grand stage. And I know you've spoken on some major ones, but like the setup was a little different, right? The setup was a little challenging. And I remember you sitting there like visualizing and taking stock of it and then asking me, how do you think you're going to best get your message out via this audience because of the platform, this damn skinny stage we were dealing with? To me, as an insanely experienced keynote speaker, yet you were digging right into the littlest details and to get up there and ready to rock, which it just showed me the word preparation and how important that is to you. I wanted to start the interview with that. Tell me about kind of what preparation does mean to you and then how it might translate to us in this business world, because that little moment showed me everything I needed to know, even though I had no history with you. It was really impactful for me, and I took a big thing away from it.
Oh, I appreciate you noticing that and bringing that up. I think that's a wonderful starting point for us. I learned very early in my coaching career that all of the high performers I had a chance to work with, work alongside, and work for wanted to make preparation their separation. They
Mm,
know that preparation is a controllable factor, and one of the concepts we use is the unseen hours. It's the hours where no one else is watching. And whether we're talking about basketball or business in general, or even real estate, it's the things you do when no one's watching that set the table for what you'll be able to do when everybody's watching and everybody's paying attention. So for me as a keynote speaker, I always try and see the venue that I'm going to be speaking in the day before, because I want to be able to see, is it going to be any type of different setup than I'm used to? And as you just mentioned, with the long kind of T-shaped catwalk type stage, it's something I had very little experience with. And I was trying to figure out from a staging and blocking and positioning standpoint, where would be the most meaningful place for me to stay and to move from on that stage to impact the most people. So that was one for sure that I was very thankful that I got to take a look at that, the day before. And I'm just a believer in preparation in every area of my life.
Mm.
But especially when it comes to keynote speaking, whether we're talking about doing a pre-event call with the client several weeks in advance to learn everything I can about their industry, their pain points, their challenges, the things that are going well, which of course at that time, early September in real estate, there was a lot of recent changes and there was a lot of things, volatility in the market and so forth. So I was fairly well aware of that from an industry standpoint. But I also wanted to make sure logistically that I was doing everything that I could. So for me, the more you can do during the unseen hours, the more confidence it gives you when the lights do come on and the cameras start rolling.
That's why do you think, like, it's pretty clear for someone like you who's been around some of these high performers and is one yourself, that when you say that, it's just, when you mentioned the story about Kobe on the stage and just again doing some of the simple things, at the weeest hours. And again, a lot of us have heard those stories about him. Why does that seem so easy and almost like expected for the ultra high achiever, yet the average person, business owner, realtor, for some reason that prep mode doesn't just become important mode? And like, have you found reasons why that continues to just be something people don't put enough energy into, and they just chase rabbits and go after things without that preparation? Any thoughts that come to mind?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's the way our society is structured and what's propagated on social media. I do believe we are all constantly unconsciously brainwashed to believe that it's okay to skip steps. I think everything is telling us that we should be looking for shortcuts and hacks.
Mm.
Everything is telling us that we need to be chasing what's new and what's flashy and what's shiny and what's sexy. Excuse me. It just takes self-discipline to realize that the real juice is in the simplicity. The real juice is in the fundamentals. The real juice is breaking things down to their basic components and working towards mastery of those during the unseen hours. And
Right.
one distinction that I want to make, and this is usually the bow tie that I put on at the end of that Kobe story that you referenced, is there's a difference between basic and easy. Those two words are not synonymous, and yet people mistakenly use them as if they're interchangeable. To make a relentless commitment to working on the fundamentals is very basic in premise, but it's not easy to do. There is
Mhm.
nothing easy about spending a couple of hours every single day working on the fundamentals of your business or working on basic skill sets. And in full transparency, many times that stuff can feel monotonous. That stuff can feel very mundane, almost boring, if you will. So it takes an incredibly disciplined person with a full commitment to excellence to be able to still have that type of focus to stick with those things, day after day. And really, to me, those are the buttons we should be pressing on more often. Consistency and discipline, I believe, are the foundation to which everything else is built. People always talk about motivation. I think motivation is over glorified and over indexed in our society. This concept that you always have to feel like doing it and you have to feel inspired about doing it. I just don't think that's sustainable. I do believe motivation and inspiration can be a very helpful gasoline on top of the fire. But at the end of the
Right.
day, if you don't have the self-discipline to commit to consistently working on the things that you need to work on behind the scenes, then no amount of motivation or inspiration's going to get you to that finish line.
I guess if you went deeper on that, if somebody is almost dismissing the need for the discipline and the prep, I wonder if the underlining thing is that they don't they don't believe that they're going to be great anyways. So I might as well just get through it. Versus some people truly say, I'm going to level up to top 1%, or I'm going to be the top agent in my market. Where others are like, I'm just trying to get a deal done, right? Or I'm just trying to like get through. Does that like what comes to mind when I say that?
Well, what comes to mind is the difference between outcomes and process. And that's
Mm,
another major pillar of what it is that I preach and teach both on stage and on page. We all live in a very outcome-based society, and real estate is 100% predicated on outcomes. I mean, at the end of the day, the goal is to sell a home if we're talking about residential real estate. So we measure our success by those outcomes. And I do believe that it's important to set goals. It's important to desire for those outcomes. But what folks fail to comprehend is your process and your commitment and consistency and discipline in that process is ultimately what will yield those outcomes that you want. So you need to focus on the part that you have control over. See, you don't necessarily have control over the outcomes in 99% of areas of our life. I mean, you don't really control whether or not the client you're working with is going to choose to buy that house. In fact, that is 100% outside of your control. But you can unpack that and go, okay, what parts of this process are within my control? Whether it's educating them about the property or making sure that you're constantly answering their questions or a certain number of touch points to make sure you're always top of mind when it's time for them to look for a new home. So there are parts of the process that you have much more control over. And that's what I want folks to focus on. So it's really focusing on those fundamentals that will yield more of the outcomes.
oh, there you go. Had an alarm. There we go. Take that off my phone. That leads me into this next question actually really well. This this concept, you talk a lot about investing in yourself, right? So if you're talking about controllables versus the uncontrollables, right? The yourself and everything about you, there's these few keys to improving your performance. And I know when I went through your world, one of them that reign true with me is this concept of self-awareness, right? And self-awareness being one of like the key fundamentals to unlocking this like investing in yourself moment where the controllables become something that you're willing to actually go and build some like parameters around. Self-awareness for many is like missing though, right? Tell me what when I say self-awareness and as a business entrepreneur trying to like really grow, again, where does your head go when I bring that topic up?
Well, self-awareness has a few different spokes that come off of that wheel.
Mm,
Ultimately, self-awareness is your evaluation of yourself congruent with the way the rest of the world sees you. And that's incredibly important. It means, are you able to view yourself accurately, or at least as accurately as any of us can? I mean, we're always looking through somewhat of a biased lens based on
yeah.
our experiences, based on our expertise, based on how, a variety of different things. But at the end of the day, is the way you evaluate yourself on par with the way the rest of the world sees you. Another part of self-awareness is having the courage to not only clarify, I'll say, and I put this in air quotes very specifically, the good stuff, your goals, your dreams, your ambitions, your strengths, your talents, your gifts. Most people are fairly in touch with that stuff because that's the feel good stuff. But do you also have the courage to look on the other side and look at the bad stuff? And the reason I'm putting that in air quotes is as an operating system for myself, I try not to look at any area of the world as good or bad or as right or as wrong. I try to look at everything with a level of neutrality, and things only become good or bad depending on the labels that we assign to it or how we choose to view it. But when I say quote unquote the bad stuff, are you willing to acknowledge your shortcomings and your flaws, your fears, your insecurities, the things that keep you up at night? To be truly self-aware, you have to be willing to look at both sides of that coin, because all of those things holistically make up who you are at present. And you can't really only look at one side. So until you're willing to say, these are the things that scare me, these are the things I'm insecure about, these are the things that historically I haven't done a really good job with, here are my biggest opportunities to grow, you need to be willing to face those things just as much as the good stuff. And if you can face all of that stuff and have a really good understanding of yourself, and your evaluation matches the way the rest of the world sees you, then you have a fairly high level of self-awareness. And the last thing I'll say on that is self-awareness is not an ending destination. It's a constant evolution. It's like physical fitness. You can't plant your flag in the ground and announce to the world, hey, everyone, I'm physically fit, and then stop working out, stop eating well, stop getting sleep. As soon as you stop doing all of those things, then you're no longer physically fit. Well, it's the same thing with self-awareness. You can't claim, hey, everyone, I'm fully self-aware, and then stop doing the internal self-work that leads to heightened self-awareness. It's a process. And I'll say, speaking from the first person, I mean, it's a process that ebbs and flows. I mean, there are times in my life where I'm just more in tune and have heightened self-awareness. And then there's other times in my life where I'm riddled with blind spots and I'm getting in my own way and I'm not quite as in tune. So it's definitely something that is continuous. It's not an ending destination.
Is there tactics that we can follow that keep us into into the light where we don't end up creating your own blind spots often? You end up down this path where you're like, holy smokes, where did I end up here? Is there anything you kind of coach to or help people with around that, or anything come to mind?
Absolutely. And it's funny because it may sound counterintuitive, but the way you heighten and strengthen self-awareness is by insulating yourself with other people that care enough to tell you the truth,
Mm,
that care enough about you to help expose some of the blind spots, that care enough about you to say, hey, Alan, the way you're behaving right now is not really congruent with the man I think you want to be. And they call you out and they hold you accountable. And for me, I'm always trying to have people in my life that can see me from those different vantage points and can hold me to the fire when maybe I'm not being my best self, or maybe when they feel that I'm completely unaware of a certain blind spot. So you want people in your life, certainly, that are cheering for you, that are championing you, that support you, and that love you. But keep in mind that one of the expressions of that love is that they hold you accountable and that they tell you the things that you need to hear, not just the things that you want to hear. So for me, heightening my self-awareness is insulating myself and surrounding myself with people that love me enough to always tell me the truth.
that step one is being open to that, right? And there are people that I know decades later have not made any, like, I can just noticeably see they've not made much change in their overall trajectory, and yet you can't make others people want that. You have to you have to be one that is willing to, like, be in there and take that on. Is that kind of like coachability a little bit too? Like, there's coachable folks, and then there's some that are just like not coachable. Do you find they go hand in hand a little bit?
Oh,
I
they
think.
absolutely do. And I'm so glad you went in that direction. Yeah. Ultimately, what we are talking about is coachability. And the foundation of coachability is humility. You have to
Mm,
have a certain level of humility to stay open to coaching. You have to have a certain amount of humility to stay open to feedback. You have to have a certain amount of humility to say that no matter how good you're getting at something, you can still get better. That you're not resting on what you did yesterday. You're still striving for improvement in any specific area. And it's humility that allows you to stay open to that type of coaching. And I'm glad that you actually use that terminology, because that's, of course, I come from an athletic background, so that's the terminology I'm most comfortable with. But I have coaches in all areas of my life. I mean, I've got
right.
a financial coach, I've got relationship coaches, I've got business coaches. It's incredibly important to have people, especially with a narrower set of skill sets and a specific expertise, to help you level up in those different areas. And one other thing I want to say about self-awareness, because I hope this actually vividly brings this to light. Here would be a perfect example. If I tell you that I'm a really good listener, and then you go ask the people that are closest to me, and they all roll their eyes and go, Alan is an awful listener. He's like talking to a rock. That would mean I have very low self-awareness. I think I'm a good listener, but the people who know me the best have a very different evaluation. If you were to ask me if I was a good listener, and I said, Darren, to be honest with you, it's something I really need to improve. I'm getting better, but I'm not quite the listener that I'm capable of. And it's really hurt me in some of my most important relationships. And then you went and asked the people closest to me, and they said, yeah, Alan's really not a great listener. That would mean I have an incredibly high sense of self-awareness. I'm very well aware of the fact that in this case, listening is something that is holding me back and potentially damaging some of my relationships. So I'm in tune with that. So this is not about self-awareness. Is not about, getting straight A's in every area of your life. Self-awareness is acknowledging the areas where you're currently falling short and what you need to improve on. And it going back to what we were just talking about, it takes a humility to be able to acknowledge that I'm not as good a listener as I'm capable of, and a coachability to be open for someone to be able to help me with that so I can grow and improve.
Makes a ton of sense. And that would, you end up going through that exercise and you find out, I think you use the term performance gaps. Is
Yes.
that right? Where there's like this, there's a gap. You're like, shoot, I thought it was here and I'm actually here. You go through, there's this whole world of, do I improve on, just double down on my strengths, or do I improve the weaknesses? I keep going back and forth on this to say, okay, a realtor self-aware, they find out they're really struggling with their listing, their communication, their marketing, their presentations, something. How do we know if like we should go out and like close the gap? Or how do we decide to say, you know what, that's just one of those things, is not my default, and it's okay to stay there, and I'm going to hire that out separately. Any, like, how do you go about this in the sense? Because it's like we can't fix it all, right? But I mean, what's your take on that?
No, we definitely can. I'm glad you brought up performance gaps. And to clarify, a performance gap is literally just the gap between what we know and what we do.
Mm,
My guess is right now, if I polled your audience that was listening and said, I want you guys to write down the healthiest foods that you know of, and I'll give you 30 seconds. My guess is most of your audience would write down many of the same foods, like the healthiest foods we know of. And then if I asked your audience, how much sleep should you be getting every night? Most of them would shout out an answer immediately. And funny enough, most of them would shout out the same answer. And then if I said, hey, what should you be doing for your physical fitness? You don't have to necessarily script a program for men's or women's health, but what should you do to take care of your body? I'm willing to bet the overwhelming majority of your audience could etch out kind of a workout program to follow. But then if I called your audience and put them to the fire and said, okay, are those the foods you've eaten today? Is that the amount of sleep you got last night? And when's the last time you did one of those workouts? My guess is, and I say this with no judgment and nothing but love and compassion, a good portion of the audience would say, no, I don't eat those foods regularly. Can't remember the last time I got that much sleep. And I haven't done one of those workouts for a few weeks. That would just show there is a gap between what they know they should do to take care of their body and what they're actually doing. And I can't stress enough, I don't say any of that with an ounce of judgment, nothing but compassion. But the point being, they need to start closing that gap if, in this example, they want to see their physical fitness improve. So they just need to start implementing the stuff that they already know. Now, the
mhm.
second part of your question is one that, quite honestly, I wrestle with often, and that is, how much of our time and resources do we allocate towards making our strengths even stronger versus trying to improve some of our weaknesses? And the best thing that I can use for myself as a filter is, how applicable is the weakness? If we're going to use listening from the previous example, I mean, I believe listening plays a major role in every single relationship in your life. I don't think you can be the spouse you're capable of, the parent you're capable of, and I know for a fact you can't be the realtor you're capable of if you're not a pretty good active listener. So that would be one that, if listening is on your list of areas of improvement, that one should probably have some time dedicated to it, because it really is going to hold you back. Now, if there's another area that maybe you're a little bit weak in, that can be allocated to someone else or delegated to someone else, then maybe you don't need to spend as much time on that. But listening is one you can't have other people do it for you. There's an old quote that says you can't pay someone to do your push-ups. Like,
Right.
if you want to get stronger, you've got to be the one to do the push-ups. But with that said, my overarching opinion is that most of our time and focus should go to making our strengths even stronger, making the things we're good at get to the point where we're great and excellent at them, but still saving some bandwidth for applicable weaknesses that would really undermine your progress in any area of your life.
Totally. Is that what you found would happen in sports too, when you would see these young bucks that were like the cream of the crop and entering, trying to get into the NBA, like you said, and would, so there was there's this world of Kobe sitting there just doing simple dribbling as a basic move, but the fundamental, but yet he was probably really good at, a couple of his like mastery type shots where it was his thing or his moves. How do you balance that a little bit where it's just like that is their strength is the fadeaway, and it's like if he could just hit that every time, it doesn't matter how big the dude is in front of him versus the basic. And how do you wrestle that?
Well, I'm so glad you used the NBA as an example for a couple of reasons. One, it's the world that I'm the most familiar with, but two, it will prove this point perfectly. In the NBA, there's roughly 450 players, and they're arguably the 450 best players in the world at the game of basketball. And despite that, at best, there's only maybe 12 to 15 players that can kind of do everything pretty well. You
Mm,
mentioned Kobe. He was certainly one of them. LeBron James is another one. Those guys, they're good offensively. They're good defensively. They can shoot the ball. They can pass the ball. They can dribble the ball. They rebound well for their position. They can kind of do everything. But they're really unicorns. The other 435 players in the NBA have one or two very specific skill sets that they've become world class at, but they don't do everything well. They get paid a lot of money to do the one or two things really well that they do. Now, some
mm,
of those guys, they're great shooters. They get paid to catch and shoot, catch and shoot, catch and shoot. Now, that doesn't give them free reign to be awful defenders and never try to grab a rebound. It just means we're paying you to put the ball in the basket. So you spend most of your time heightening your skill at shooting the basketball. Other guys are there because they're defensive stoppers. There's guys on the court who are elite defenders. There's guys on the court who are great rebounders, great shot blockers, guys that are great playmakers. But for the most part, they earn the lion's share of their income, and their role on the team is predicated on having one or two of these world-class skill sets. So that's an example. These guys that get paid to catch and shoot the ball, they don't spend an inordinate amount of their time practicing defense, practicing ball handling, practicing passing. They spend most of their time doing shooting drills because that's what the team needs from them to be successful. And then you do have the unicorns like a LeBron James or a Kobe Bryant that can kind of do everything. But the overwhelming majority of us, and I very much put myself in that category, am not a unicorn, which means I need to figure out the couple of things that I do pretty well, and I need
mm.
to double down on those, double click on those, and do everything I can to make those world class.
Yeah, I mean, that analogy is so perfect. I spend most of my time coaching realtors off the ledge, like getting less on their plate, doing less things, and high performers at the top of their fields. And like, no, can we just strip that away? Because you're doing, well, for one, you're loving what you do when you do these things, and everything else feels forced and doesn't create the same ROI for you. Yet you're watching around, and I think I need to do these things. So, like in our world, we like online lead generation. It's like anybody can go spend dollars to create leads, but then who wants to run the behind the computer, do the nurture, do the 12 months follow up, chase cold leads and get ghosted for 12 months? Like it's like nobody does. But there's a few people that do that very, very well, right? And
Absolutely.
so yeah, I mean it's a great message. Speaking of great messages, when I was kind of like doing my research on, I couldn't help but kept coming back to this one story you shared that was weaved through your whole website. And it was this one of the fallen leaf. And it seems to be the center point of kind of what brought you here. I didn't want to even go into it. I just wanted you to almost, if you're willing to share a little bit about that moment, about just that full circle moment that created that. Would you be open to sharing that to the audience?
Absolutely, of course. And if anyone wants to go to my site, alansteinjr.com, it's on my bio page. It's kind of a more lengthy description. Well, I guess for context, when I was going to college in the early 90s, I was going to play basketball at a small university down in North Carolina. And I knew how much I loved the game of basketball, but I didn't really have a vocational target. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Now, at that time, both of my parents were in elementary education, and both of my parents were teachers for 30 years. And I saw how much enjoyment and fulfillment they got out of teaching. So, since I didn't really have any other direction, I figured, hey, that might be a good route for me to go. And kind of in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I'll be a teacher, but that's only a conduit to being a basketball coach because that's really what I'd want to do. And kind of fast forward a little bit, I'm doing my first semester of student teaching to follow this path. And the teacher gave the kids an assignment to go outside and collect leaves, and they needed to laminate the leaves and they need to look them up, which of course I'm showing my age a little bit, but you'd have to look them up in the encyclopedia because it was pre-internet, and kind of label the leaves and what the name of it was and where it came from and all this stuff. And I just remembered standing there that moment thinking to myself, this might be the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, I don't care at all about leaves. And there's no way I'm going to spend the next 30 years of my life trying to convince other people that leaves are important. So it just hit me like a ton of bricks. This is not right for me. I can't pursue something that I'm just not passionate about or something I'm not in full support of. So I literally left left the student teaching, went to my advisor, and switched my major on the spot to pursue something I was more passionate about. And thankfully, that worked out very well because it put me on a path to being a basketball performance coach, which then has iterated into being a keynote speaker. But yeah, knowing that I couldn't devote my time pouring into something that I didn't believe in or didn't think was important. But now that I can look back on it with a little more hopefully with some wisdom and some maturity, I can certainly recognize that assignment was not really about leaves. Like, that assignment was teaching a process. That assignment was teaching how to learn. It was teaching how to work. It was teaching things. Leaves was just kind of the vessel at which the assignment was created, but it wasn't about leaves. It was about learning how to learn. It was about appreciating a process. It was about saying there are fundamental steps to being able to do anything. So now that I look back on it, I can appreciate why that was an assignment and that it was actually bigger than the leaves that were just, right in front of us that day.
Yeah, totally. I remember doing that darn thing as a kid. I remember like being out there, and I saw maybe that's why it hit home to me. Is I was like, I remember that, and it's like hearing your story was comedic in it, but then when you full circled it to talk about the process and the system, and I know when you coach, you speak about that and all of the different layers about kind of just falling in love with the process, not just like the result. Like this could have
Yeah.
been a cooler thing to do than leaves, but it was about this process. Realtors struggle with that too, right? They
Yeah.
really
One of the things I do now, as a parent, so for context, I have 14-year-old twin sons who are in ninth grade, and I have a 12-year-old daughter in seventh grade. And inevitably, they're working on something in school that, quote unquote, is kind of like the Leaves Project. They'll say to me, Dad, when am I ever going to use this in the real world? And I'll say, in full transparency, you won't. But that's not why you're being asked to do it. And that's when I can actually draw on that as a parent and say, you're being asked to do this assignment because you need to learn how to learn. You're being asked to do this because you need to learn a process. You're being asked to do this because there's a bigger lesson hidden behind what they're actually asking you to do. And if nothing else, also understand that there are times in life where we have to do things that we don't necessarily want to do because they lead us down the path to do the thing we really, really want to do. And that not everything in this world is puppy dogs and ice cream. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices and do parts of any job or class that maybe aren't your favorite, but they're a requirement to getting where it is that you want to go. So that leaves lesson, if you will, has served me many times over, especially as a parent.
in real estate with I mean, you've seen this, and you're not a realtor, so you see like the rise of these network television pieces and these streaming shows about like what life in real estate is like supposed to be, and it's just like unfortunately a lot of agents get caught up in that, and they're easy to dismiss. They're like, well, that's not us. But I think they still want that, "I wish that was me," type of, like, vibe versus getting back in love with the process. Now, it's one thing to be a keynote speaker and have, like, one really good talk, because there's a lot of those guys and gals, right? They have, like, one. But, like, you are on another level, looking at, again, multiple times author, so you've got, again, this concept of raise your game, raise our game, raise your sales, sustain your game. Like, all of these massive topics that you've been able to pull together these monumental keynotes that you're being called upon depending on the audience with all these different takeaways. To me, I was like, damn, again, amazing that you've got that much behind you. So I do have a question for you.
Sure.
It's business planning season for us in real estate. This is like get shit together, right? In real estate right now. So among all of this, where all of these different major topics that you coach and train and support on, what do business people need to get right at this section of the year, right? When they're positioning themselves for the new year, like of all the topics that you speak on, where does your head go when you say it's like, I'm in this like pre-preparation plan with my realtors.
Mhm.
And like from everything you talk about, where does your head go to get them ready to properly plan?
Well, the very first thing, and first of all, anyone that's watching or listening to this that is entering that planning phase, I commend you. I give you a huge high five and a fist bump for being prepared to go through that process. I'm big into reflection and evaluation, which
Mm,
then leads to the preparation for what it is that you're going to do next. First and foremost, and this is kind of a theme we've kind of been talking about this conversation, and that is if you want your business to be better in 2025, then you need to be better in 2025. Like, don't focus so much on selling more homes, focus on becoming more valuable. And being more
mm,
valuable will sell you more homes. But think of it again holistically. How can you be better physically? How can you be better mentally, emotionally, spiritually, if that's appropriate to you? See, if you can, raise the floor level in each of those areas, then you have more capacity to implement whatever business strategy you eventually decide to use. So first and foremost is you got to prioritize your own self-care and your own personal and professional development. You need to become better and you need to become more valuable to the marketplace. So that's number one. And I hope that becomes kind of a cornerstone of this planning that you're doing. Next is you need to kind of reflect on the past year and don't focus on circumstances and events. Don't focus on the economic climate. Don't focus on the changes in rules and regulations and all of that stuff, because all of that stuff was outside of your control. But just take a look at your process. Take a look at your relationships. And really, you want to look at what things went well, because I want to keep doing those things, and what things didn't go so well that I either need to get rid of or I need to tweak and try to improve. One of the oldest recipes to being successful in anything, and I always say this with a huge smile because it's obvious 101, and that is do more of what works and do less of what doesn't. So really, ultimately, look back on this past year, throw out all the stuff that was outside of your control, look at the stuff that was under your control, your preparation, your planning, your execution, your relationships, and then put it in one of two buckets. Was this something that went well that I want to keep doing? Or was this something that didn't go so well? And then if it's in that bucket, you have a choice to make. Either nix it completely or decide to refine it and tweak it and iterate it and give it another try. But that's how we continually, systematically, incrementally make improvements, is we keep doing the stuff that's working and we level up the stuff maybe that's not, or we get rid of it. But that's really the big part of it. And it's focusing on the stuff you have control over. How well did you show up every time you were needed, whether you were showing up for an open house or to show a house, or showing up on Zoom, or showing up for an initial coffee, or showing up to speak to a group, like whatever you were showing up for, how well did you show up? And what can you do to level that up? So, focus on the parts you control, your effort and your attitude, and then do more of what works, do less of what doesn't, and then double down on making yourself better and making yourself more valuable. And that will always lead to better outcomes.
That's so key, what you just said, because when an agent sits down to business plan, the first thing everybody's taught to do is like, what was the result? And it's like, I sold 6 listings and I sold 6 buyers and I made this much money. I can tell you, nobody's going in to be like, first and foremost, what was my process like, right? And then I think the second one was about just being more valuable, right? Like, what if we business plan from that standpoint rather than just off the backs of these results, like you said, which was a combination of controllables, non-controllables that just happened.
Yeah.
And they generally just like add a 0 to that, right? It's like double that number, but not what process got me there. Let me self-aware that. And like how was I in this whole thing? Like, was I consistent? Was I improved? Was I healthy and energetic? Or was I just running, like a crazy man? Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you said that, and that just sparked something. One of the most important questions that we can ask ourselves, especially when we don't get the outcomes that we prefer. If your goal was to sell X number of houses and you fell 20% short of that, first and foremost, we are not going to blame that on the external circumstances. No matter how valid or true the
Right.
economy or interest rates might have been, it doesn't serve us any purpose to place blame on that. So the most important question we can ask ourselves is, how was I complicit in not getting the result that I wanted? Like, what was my role in not reaching my goal? Because we want to have an attitude of extreme ownership. We want to hold ourselves fully accountable. So even though the economy and interest rates may have played a very valid and true role in you having a slower year, it doesn't do us any good to blame that. So let's go back on the parts we have control over and say, okay, how was I complicit in not getting the result that I want? And what role did I play? And that's the very first part that we want to start working on. And that, honestly, that takes vulnerability. That takes some
Hmm.
courage to be able to acknowledge that. And going back to a word we used earlier, that takes humility. It takes humility to be able to say, hey, I fell a little bit short this year and it's my fault. I fell a little bit short this year, and here are some things that I could have potentially done differently, but still leaning in with enough confidence and optimism to say, hey, I'm glad I've learned that lesson, and I'm not going to repeat that lesson in 2025. I'm actually going to do a better job of the areas where I fell short so that maybe I'll get a different result in 2025. So personal accountability and extreme ownership is so, so important. And that really should be a part of your business planning and your strategy, is being able to lean into that and do that.
It's such a differentiator, isn't it? Those that just take that or don't, right? It's like a clear line in the sand. It's not like I'm a half take ownership kind of guy. I'm like, I either do or I don't. And you see that in the results. I see that within the walls of my team that I coach, and the people. It's a massive difference, isn't it? Like factors of huge factors between the results of the person that's willing to take it and those who deny ownership in a sense.
Yeah. And one other thought, in addition to kind of some of these tactics and techniques and thought process, is I want to encourage everyone just to shift your entire mindset on how you view selling in the first place. And I know you heard me say this on stage when we were in Nashville, but when you can learn to shift your focus off of what you want from people and you shift it to what you want for people, it's an absolute game changer, especially in any type of sales, which is certainly real estate. You know, we all know what you want is for your clients to buy homes through you. Like we know that is the intended outcome. We know that's what you want from them, but that can't be what you're focused on. You got to be focused on delivering and adding value, being of service to them, doing anything you can to add value to their life. And if you can do that, then the innate, cosmic result of that is you will see an increase in selling homes. But it's not, I want to be very specific about this. This is not a manipulation tactic. This is
Mhm.
not, I'm going to do something for you because then you'll owe me, or I'm going to do something for you so then you'll feel you have to buy a home through me. No, this is being of service and adding value because you believe it is the right thing to do and you believe in lighting other people's candles. And I
Yeah.
often say, a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. And really, that's the business you're in when you're in sales. How many candles can I light? How much value can I add? And ask yourself, would you be willing to go above and beyond in every way, shape, or form for a client that might buy a home from someone else? So you're not even going to reap the benefit of the work that you put in. And when you can get to the point where you would say, hey, if they felt that another realtor was a better fit for them, I'm at peace with that. I gave to them because I believed it was the right thing to do, and I believe in adding value and being of service. I have no expectation of anything in return. When you have that type of mindset, it's just been my experience, you become the most magnetic person in the room immediately. People are dying to do business with you and want to be around you because you're giving. And to me, that can be another part of this business planning. What are the myriad of ways that I can find where my potential clients live, and how can I add value to their lives in as many ways as possible? And then I'll always be top of mind when it's time for them to buy a home.
Well, yeah, I use I'm glad you brought that up because I coached through the actual client journey. So somebody's raised their hand and they're going to work with you. You're like, yes, I'm finally realtoring, whether it's through a listing or a purchase side, right? You find them the right home. They're giving you a good review, right? Like, I mean, you do the good job or you sell their home for somewhere around where they're hoping. You've kind of
Yes.
like, you've did the job, right? That's like client happiness equals, well, from the result. But I challenge my people to say, can you create the client happiness independent of the result? Right.
Mhm.
So it's not just because you did what you were paid to do. It's like, how about the whole journey? And then what happens, happens. You know what I mean? Because then they can review and refer you independent of the happiness story that, hopefully lands at the end of the day. So I think we're speaking the same language.
Oh, we definitely are. And keep in mind too, when we're selling anything, you're really not selling. You're there solving. Like you're trying to solve a problem. Now in real estate, it's pretty crystal clear. The problem is they're either looking to sell their home or they're looking for a home to buy, and that's the problem that you're solving. But it's been my experience when you look through it through the lens of I'm here to help them solve a problem, then you're going to be more service oriented than if you're literally just trying to sell because you're the one that wants to sell the home because you have a certain number of homes you're trying to sell. You've got a quota.
Hmm.
We understand what's in it for you, but what's in it for them? Are you willing to do the extra work to sell them the right home versus trying to just sell them something that would be a quick fix? Are you trying to sell them the home that's best for them? Or are you trying to sell them the home that would give you the best commission? And these are normal things for all of us to wrestle with. I mean, as human beings, we're inherently selfish from the moment we're born. Like we're
Yeah.
born, we have to be looking out for ourselves. We have to do what's in our own best interest. So I think it actually takes some diligence and some discipline to take that off and to actually lean into what is best for this person. And if you're always doing what's best for them, not what's best for yourself, to me, that's how you build the type of stellar reputation that will come back forever. And when you do that, you put someone in the right home for them, even if it meant a lower commission for you, you know, they're never going to forget that. And you'll be top of mind for any referrals they make. You'll be top of mind when it's time for them to sell that home and move into somewhere else. So also, one point to make that I see a lot in the real estate business make the mistake of is they're playing the short game when all of us should be playing the long game. We should all be thinking 5, 10, 15, 20 years out, especially if you're selling a home to a newlywed couple that's in their mid 20s. I don't know what the statistics are. I'm sure you do, but they're probably going to have multiple houses over the course of their lifetime. Wouldn't it be
Yeah.
great if you were the one that was always top of mind? And there's a good chance they've got a circle of friends and a circle of influence, of dozens of people that are around their same age that are also going to be buying multiple homes over the course of the next few decades. So do right by the client and you can never go wrong.
Yeah, no, it's most realtors build their business early on with their sphere of influence. And then the first couple years, people can get through that. And then what happens is they like realize their sphere is tapped because there's a 7, 9 year cycle of people, and they haven't put in those guardrails around just keeping top of mind, staying top of mind, and they lose out in the first 2 years seem rosy, then it gets worse because then someone hasn't actually become a business person yet. They just kind of got a little lucky and were a reasonable person to many people. Um, okay, so you do this business planning. You get right, you get bring value, you've got this plan up and running. And I was kind of thinking about this. It's kind of like again the NBA, right? You get excited, you're in the off season, you're training, the new season just hits. I don't watch the NBA as much as I watch the NHL. Then you
Sure.
put in the work and then game time, right? The prep is behind you and off you go. And you're in the new season. We're in the new business season next year, right? Every realtor is going to be in this world in early January. And one thing I know is most things won't go as planned, right? Just like you get on like my Edmonton Oilers, they are just horrible and they shouldn't be, right? And they don't go as planned. Things get a little messy in our minds pretty quickly, just like the people dropping off the gym, right? Within 30 days, it's like vanish. How how can we not get derailed and just stay? And I mean, I don't know if this lines up with kind of one of your talks around sustaining your game, but I was trying to think about this. I was like, how do we just not fully lose track and get messy? And do you have any tactics around that to the business person, or even an analogy from your sports life?
Yeah, I most certainly do it. And part of it's what's the sign that's above my head, this concept of we need to simplify success.
Mm,
We need to untether from the unnecessarily complex. I think one of the things that derails our ability to do that is complexity. And I've always believed that complexity undermines execution. So the name of the game is execution. It's implementation. It's action. No business plan is even worth the paper it's written on if you're not going to actually put it into action. If what you're writing down, if you don't bring that to fruition and execute it in 2025, that piece of paper is basically worthless. So in order to increase your chances of whatever it is you're writing down in your business plan to be put into action, we need to simplify it as much as possible. We need to break it down to the basics and the fundamentals and work relentlessly towards those. That is one of several reasons why someone would fall off, with their workout program, because they say, for the last 6 to 8 months, I haven't worked out, I haven't eaten very healthy, I haven't taken care of myself. So on January 1st, I'm going to take 3 Peloton classes a week. I'm going to do yoga. I'm going to hire a personal trainer. I'm going to throw out all the food in my pantry, and I'm going to, get a chef. And they have this complex web of all these things they're going to do. And then 2 to 3 weeks into the new year, they ain't doing none of it. Whereas if they would have just said, starting on January 1st, every morning I'm going to go for a 30-minute walk. That's it. Full stop. I'm going to go for a 30-minute walk. If it's nice outside, I'll walk outside. If it's not nice outside, I'll walk on the treadmill. But no matter what, I'm going to go for a 30-minute walk. That's the only thing in my life I'm going to change. And if they would do that with some consistency and start building that discipline muscle, they would see change. And then over time, then they can, stack, habit stack, like James Clear likes to say, and say, hey, after my 30-minute walk, I'm going to have a green smoothie. And then, after my green smoothie, and you can slowly start to build and grow into the types of habits and morning routines in this example that you want to have, as opposed to being so unnecessarily complex. I mean, the workout world is full of that stuff. Like here's a workout program with all these different exercises and sets and reps and all of it. It's like, just go move your body. Just go move your body and progressively get a little bit of a sweat going on, and you'll start to see a change. And there really is a 3-step formula that someone can follow when they're looking to change a behavior. And the very first step is what I just said, is just pick one thing. Don't try to change multiple things at once. Just pick one. So don't have a bunch of New Year's resolutions, plural. Just have one thing that you're going to change. I'm a self-diagnosed quote nerd, and one of my favorite quotes of all time is, if you chase 2 rabbits, they both get away. So instead, figure out which one you're going to go after and go grab that sucker by the tail. But you have to have enough focus to say, this is the one thing I'm going to go after. Once you've decided on the one thing, then I want you to commit to doing that one thing for the next 66 days. And the reason I say 66 days, the research is kind of all over the place, but the best research that I've seen when it comes to building a new behavior or habit is it takes around 66 days for an actual habit to form. Now that's just a little bit over 2 months. So it's not easy to do by any means, but it is doable. I didn't say it takes 6 days, and I didn't say it takes 6 years. It takes around 66 days. So just make a commitment to yourself. For the next 66 days, I'm going to try to do this one thing. And the example we're using is just go for a 30-minute walk. You've established to yourself, I need to prioritize my physical fitness because it will give me more energy and more mental clarity, and I'll just feel more confident. So I'm going to go for a walk for 30 minutes, and I've promised myself for the next 66 days, I'm going to do that. Now, I'm old school. I like to print out a paper calendar and get a big red Sharpie, and every day I go for that walk, I'm going to put a big X on it. But I'm also going to make sure that I give myself some grace and space to be less than perfect. I'm going to give myself some compassion to say, on day 13, I just don't feel like going for a walk, and I miss it that day. And instead of self-loathing, and instead of, being very critical and judgmental of myself, instead of stacking on shame and guilt, I'm going to give myself permission to be less than perfect. And I'm just going to pick right up the next day. So I don't have an X on day 13, but that's okay. I'm human, and I'm going to start it up. My goal is to not miss 2 in a row. So I'm
Right.
not going to just quit the whole program because I fell off the wagon. I'm going to get right back at it. And I'm going to start a new chain of red X's tomorrow morning. So give yourself a little breathing room to be less than perfect. So step one is pick one thing. Step two is commit yourself to 66 days of doing this thing. And then step three is very similar to what we were talking about early in this conversation, is have a board of directors in your life, an inner
Mhm.
circle of people that are going to hold you accountable to this thing. This could be your spouse, it could be your older children, it could be a coworker, it could be a neighbor, could be a friend, whatever it may be. But tell 3 or 4 people, hey, I want to improve my physical fitness. I've committed to going for a 30-minute walk every morning for 66 days. Will you please hold me accountable? Will you please check in with me? If it's your spouse, maybe every night at dinner, they can ask you if you went for your walk. If it's someone that you don't live with, maybe they can send you a text. But have 3 or 4 people check in with you every single day and ask if you did what you said you were going to do. And just the fact that you're going to have to tell these people that you love and care about, who are trying to help you, that you're going to tell them that, I didn't go for my walk today, that might be just enough to help hold you accountable to doing what you said you were going to do. But I want you to be honest. On that day
Right.
13, when you didn't go for a walk, it's going to feel really bad that you let them down, but let them know, hey, I missed today. I'm not proud of that, but I'm going to get right back on it and get after it tomorrow. And if these people really and truly love you and care about you and want to see you happy, they will support that. And if you can do those 3 things, if you can just pick one thing, have relentless focus for 66 days, and have people that love you hold you accountable, there's a really good chance that you will change that behavior. And at the end of the 66 days, just going for a 30-minute walk will be just part of what you do. And then at that point, that's when you add something else. And then 66 days after that, you can add something else. And keep in mind too, that last thing I'll say on this, because I know that was a lot, it's not just about adding things. Many
Mhm.
times what is more helpful is we remove something that's getting in our way. So it's not I'm going to add going for a walk, it's I'm going to stop doing this behavior because it's not congruent with the person I'm trying to become. So you're either starting or stopping something. And then roughly every 2 months, you're slowly leveling up. And I can tell you this from firsthand experience with myself and with a lot of people that I've worked with. Just imagine in 2025, every 2 months, you either add or subtract a habit that's going to add value to your life, or you remove one that has been undermining your ability. And you do that every 2 months. By the end of 2025, you will be a completely different person. You will have added or subtracted 5 or 6 things that are either adding value or eroding it. You will be a completely different person by the end of that year.
That's it's so good for my audience to hear because again, I if one of us just did what we're supposed to, like if it's about, talking to your database or making those emails or doing the door knocking in your community, if a realtor actually did that for 66 days, as simple as that is, th- they would be a completely changed person. Their business would be changed for the better. And then, like you said, that's just what you do. This is what I do now, right? You talk to people like yourself who are fit. It's not like it's a challenge to be fit. It's like, I just am a fit person. A fit person does these things. You know what I mean? Which is so different. But again, you got to, habit stack one by one to get there. Now, I know we're short on time. I could have gone for like 3 more pages of notes. I love
No, it's
chatting with
so
you.
much fun. Well, we can
I
always do a part two, man. If you get a good response from this and your audience feels this has been helpful, I have so much admiration and respect for you. We can do this every couple months, man. If this is adding value, I'm happy to do it.
super fun. There's so many angles we could go with you. Where do people find you and follow you? What's the best way to stay in touch to jump on things like your books? I mean, see maybe where your schedule of like when you're speaking, because you're speaking almost every week, it seems, or multiple times a week, or just one a day on the daily grind with you. Where do they follow you?
So the website is just alansteinjr.com, and that's kind of the epicenter of everything. I am at Alan Stein Jr. On Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I take pride in being very accessible and responsive on social media. So shoot me a DM on either LinkedIn or Instagram. If you have a question, or if there's something I can be of service for, I'm really good about getting back to folks. If you have an interest in either book, Raise Your Game or Sustain Your Game, you can get those on Amazon or Audible or wherever you like to get your books and audiobooks. And if anybody listening, if you run an event or you have a company or a group of realtors and you feel like my message would resonate, all of my speaking programs are on the website. You can just fill out the contact form and we can have a discussion there. But this was a lot of fun, man. I really enjoy our conversation. You are a world-class listener. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the due diligence and the work you did in preparation to make sure that we had such a thoughtful and thorough conversation. So kudos to you, man. This is a really great show, and you're adding a massive service to the people that follow you.
Well, amazing. Thank you so much for that. I enjoy these. These are like, selfishly, these are like for me, but of course to just, share with such an audience and a growing audience of mine. So thank you so much, my friend. I know you're got a bunch of stuff for the balance of the year and then you're winding down. So thanks for taking the time. And it was a pleasure to meet and hear you in Nashville and to continue connect. So I look forward to our next time. I'll keep in touch. Thanks for such an amazing dialogue, and I'll let you get on your show, get on with your day. So thank you, everybody. This is another Reeducation Experience podcast. We'll catch you again soon.